This Gender Summit is different from others before because we now have robust policy that encourages researchers to consider sex and gender in their research. So the past 6 months has been very exciting. Last December, the European Commission launched Horizon 2020 and designated 137 fields of science, health, and engineering to include sex and gender analysis. And just last month, the U.S. National Institutes of Health announced that it will require grantees to include sex and gender analysis in very basic biomedical research. And of course, our Canadian colleagues who are with us here today are ahead of everybody. In 2010, the Canadian Institutes of Health Research implemented these requirements. And we expect the European Research Council and the U.S. National Science Foundation to follow suit in the life sciences, I would say, and in engineering in any field with human endpoints. And I'd also like to say that my Korean colleagues who are with us today tell me that their National Research Foundation is considering similar measures. And the big news is that Science Magazine and Nature will, in the next 6 weeks or so, announce new guidelines for reporting sex and gender analysis. So you see the beauty of this. We have the encouragement of the researchers at the beginning with the granting agencies, and we have the encouragement of the researchers at the end with the publications. Now we need for researchers to learn how to do sex and gender analysis. It's not so clear. And universities must integrate this into the curriculum. And so the editor-in-chief of Science, when I was asking about what they're doing, she threw it back at me, and she said, well, we can only report on what is being done, and you universities need to get going. So yes, let's get going. All right, so more about these policy kinds of things a little bit later, but first let me give some background for those of you who are new to the topic. Over the past several decades, governments and universities have taken 3 strategic approaches to gender equality. The first is to fix the numbers of women, which focuses on increasing women's participation. The second is fix the institutions, which promotes gender equality in careers through structural change in research organizations. And the third, which is my passion, is fix the knowledge, or gendered innovations, which stimulates excellence in science and technology by integrating sex and gender analysis into research. So I'm going to focus on this third strategic approach. They're all important, and we need to do them all, but I'm going to focus on this one. For me, it's the newest and most exciting area, and the most important for the future of science, engineering, and innovation. What we know is that doing research wrong costs lives and money. So we know that between 1997 and 2010, drugs were withdrawn from the US market because of life-threatening health effects for everyone, and 8 of those pose greater threats for women. Not only did these drugs cost billions of dollars to develop, but when they fail, they cause human death and suffering. We can't afford to get it wrong. But we also know that doing research right saves lives and money. We just had a very interesting analysis in the United States, an analysis of the US Women's Health Initiative hormone therapy trial. This was a very large government-funded trial to see if women should take hormones after menopause. The answer is no, but this very large trial was recently analyzed. The trial was in the 1990s, and now we have analyzed it. And the authors found that for every dollar spent, $140 were returned. And not only did it save money, but it also saved lives. There were 76,000 fewer heart attacks, 126,000 fewer breast cancers, 145,000 quality years added to life, and the downside was that there were more osteoporotic fractures. So we can see it's crucially important to get the research right. And this is the goal of the Gendered Innovations Project. This project develops state-of-the-art methods of sex and gender analysis, guiding researchers through the process with questions that they can pose to their research. And it provides case studies to illustrate how gender analysis leads to innovation in science and technology. So Gendered Innovations was a project that developed over the past 4 years through a series of international collaborative workshops which were funded by the European Commission, the National Science Foundation, and Stanford University. It consisted of 60 scientists and gender experts that we brought together. All the materials, our website is free for you to use. All the materials are peer-reviewed, so we hope that they're very high quality. So Gendered Innovations harnesses the creative power of sex and gender analysis to discover new things. So now let me give you a couple, just probably 2 quick examples of gendered innovations from the area of science and technology. So let's go back to why 10 drugs were withdrawn from the market. These days, developing a drug costs 4 billion euros. There are many reasons why drugs fail, and fail more often for women. One is that, rather shockingly, men are still the subjects of research, whether in humans, animals, or cells and tissues. And we have a great study from Berkeley University showing the sex of the animal used in research. And you can see the blue here, that the males are preferred except in studies of reproduction where women dominate. But what I want you to draw to your attention is the gray area. This is where the sex of the animal is not recorded. It's data lost. You can't use these studies for meta-analysis. You might as well throw the money out the window. Now we have a similar study from Mayo Clinic on cells and tissues, and all I want you to look at is the gray area. We have no idea what's going on for sex analysis in cells and tissues. This is something that researchers should ask. Okay, this is known, and we have policy aiming at this problem. So funding agencies have now taken the important step to require researchers to design sex and gender into research from the very beginning. And that's super, but researchers don't know how to do it. So let me give you this example from animal research. We now know, and I've been working with my visualization guy. We're just starting on this. So you're the first audience to see our little mouse. You saw some mice this morning, but here's our little mouse. And what we're interested here is how the sex, that's the stuff, the biological characteristics inside the little mouse, interact with what I see as the gender or the environment, which is these factors surrounding the mouse. So they interact, and the effect comes from that. And now I want to go quickly to the website and look at, Elizabeth asked me to look at some of the methods, so I want to look at these a little bit with you here. So when we are analyzing sex, it's not going to, now NIH and European Commission are asking researchers, doing very basic biomedical research, to look at the sex of their animals. When doing this, you can't just add the female mice and mix. We have to really look at how to do this research. It won't be enough just to record the sex of the animal. And if we just look at a male and female binary, just compare males and females, this may obscure other things. It may obscure sexual variation, such as intersex. We often emphasize the difference between males and females. This is just a chart of the height of men and women. I give it for an example here. But we want to understand the similarities between groups, right? So if we have a research project, we don't want to say that men and women are from Mars and from, I don't know, Venus or something. There's a lot of similarity as well. We also don't want to obscure the in-group differences. So if you take women, you have to say which women. are you talking about? For height, we have short women, we have tall women. Again, for men, there's variation within the group. So we have to be very careful to see these things. And then very importantly, when we are doing, very importantly, when we are looking at sex and gender, we also have to look at factors intersecting with sex and gender. We know that for humans, things like ethnicity is very important, socioeconomic status. For animals, some of the things that are important, these factors intersecting with sex, are the age of the animal, the strain or the type of the rat used, and the reproductive phase. So in this animal expert, one of the key questions is going to be about the estrus cycle. You'll be happy to know that rats have their period every 4 days. Now, an important question for the researchers will be, how many control groups are needed? So some say 10, that you need to control for each day of that estrus cycle, those pesky hormones that females have. But that will be very expensive. And some say 6 control groups are needed because you only have to look at 2 parts of the cycle, the estrus and the diestrus. And a new study has come out, again from Canada, that shows that you don't need to add any extra control groups, that males are in many ways as variable as females. However, I think that may overlook the importance of the hormonal cycles. So this is very contentious right now and is something that we will need to resolve as a research community. Now, in addition to analyzing sex, we also need to analyze gender. My students got very upset with me this year when I started talking about the gender of mice. So, what do we mean by gender? So we know we have gender norms. This refers to researchers' attitudes, different attitudes toward male and female animals. So I think we can talk about gender there. Gender also is about gender relations, and this refers to the actual interaction between male and female animals and between the men and women researchers and these animals. So I think we can also talk about gender there. And then gender identities, I think that's where we get stuck. I don't think mice have gender identities. Okay, so now let me come back to my little mouse for a moment. And what I want to talk about now, so I talked about the biological aspects. I want to look at what I'm going to call the gender or environmental aspects for our little mouse. And again, we've had some really interesting studies coming out. Let's take the issue of caging. Now, what we don't want to do is confuse caging practices with sex differences. Male and female animals are caged differently. Very often, male animals are caged by themselves because they tend to fight. And female animals will be caged 4 or so in a cage because that's economical. If an animal is caged by itself, its metabolism has to go very, very fast in order for it to keep warm. So the scientists may be looking at metabolism. Animals that are caged together, they can keep each other warm. So again, we don't want to confuse caging practices with sex differences. And I'll mention one other very interesting study about the researchers or the staff, and that is that the sex, we have learned again from Canada, they're ahead because they have this policy, and it has really influenced their research. It's, as a historian, I'm going to look exactly into that. I'm looking at Joy Johnson now, who has done these things. So we've learned that the sex of the researcher can matter. This is for pain research. Sorg et al., this was just published, found out that a man researcher, the scent of the man causes the little mouse to suppress their pain. They will not reveal that they are in pain. This is exactly what the researchers are studying. How much pain is the animal experiencing? A woman researcher who is wearing the t-shirt that a man has slept in for 8 hours and therefore has the same scent will also have the same impact, but a woman researcher herself does not have the same impact. Now, the author, the lab, this came out of Jeffrey Mogul's lab, and he claims that this is so important that we may have to redo all the basic pain research. So I wanted to give another example from engineering, and I certainly could do that, but I will succumb to my 5-minute request here. I think universities need to get going. And one of the ways, I'm just going to give one way that we can do that. Kurt Rice, who addressed you this morning, developed this idea in Norway at Tromsø University, and we have taken this over into the Stanford Medical School. And what they do and what we are now doing on their model is to give seed grants to researchers to add extra money, to add sex and gender to their research. But first, those researchers have to come to a workshop on sex and gender analysis. And we had 40 professors of medicine staying for 3 hours exchanging their information on sex and gender analysis. We had way too many people apply for our very tiny seed grants, and they're now coming to fruition. We'll do another round. I think this is something that universities can do. I want to go back to Stanford and discuss this with our Dean of Research and see if we can't get our researchers at the university ready for the NIH, perhaps for Horizon 2020. We need to be ready and be developing, working on the very best research analysis. Thank you very much.